Okay, so in the previous video we introduced the product rule and we also did two examples. In this video I'm just going to do two additional examples just so that you don't have to watch a really long video if you already understood the previous part. So this is just for, I guess, for kicks. So the product rule is taking the derivative of a function that is composed of the product of two functions, right? So f of x and g of x, and the way you write it is going to be h prime of x equals f prime x times g of x plus g prime x times f of x. Okay, so the very first thing is to break this down into two functions. So f of x is going to be 2x squared x squared minus 3x, and g of x is going to be 7 to the x power. Okay, so essentially what is f prime? That's very easy. It's just a polynomial function, so we can easily take the derivative rule of that. So that is going to be 4x minus 3. Okay, and then g prime of x is going to be the natural log of 7 times 7x. Okay, and this is basically an exponential derivative, which I've actually talked about when we proved the derivative of e to the x. So basically, if your function, suppose that g of x is going to be b to the x, and b is a constant, if you take g prime, then it's just going to be the natural log of b times b to the x. Okay, and if your constant is e, right, then for example, let's say that m of x equals e to the x, then m prime of x is going to be the natural log of e times e to the x, and the natural log of e is just 1. Okay, so that's why m prime of this is just e to the x. Okay, there is a more specific proof video for that. But now that we know we know f prime of x and we know g prime of x, then we can simply just put it in our derivative product rule. Okay, so h prime of x is going to be f prime, which is 4x minus 3 times g prime times g of x, which is 7x, plus my other half, which is going to be 2x squared minus 3x, that's f of x, and then g prime is going to be the natural log of 7 times 7x. Okay, so this is going to be my answer, and I'm going to highlight it as such. So highlight right here. Okay, so let's go, get to the next question. Okay, so here we have, let me change this to an h of x. Let's break this down. We know that h of x is composed of two functions, f of x and g of x, and we know that h prime is going to be f prime of x times g of x plus f of x g prime. Okay, and so we can say that f of x is 2x to the negative 2, and g of x is going to be e to the x. Okay, so now let's find the derivative of f of x, and derivative of f of x is going to be negative 4x to the negative 3. Okay, so basically you have that original exponent, right? So multiply it times the constant, and then subtract 1 from the exponent, and that's how we got that f prime. Okay, so then g prime of x, what is the derivative of e to the x? The same thing, e to the x. Okay, So now we just put it into our derivative rule. Okay, so h prime, what is my f prime, is going to be negative 4x to the negative 3. G of x is e to the x plus f of x is 2x minus 2, and g prime is the same thing, e to the x. Okay, so now we are done. We are just going to highlight. Oops, let me go back. That's what I get. Okay, so this is going to be the answer. Okay, we're basically just following the product rule. This is, however, the more interesting example. If you are taking the derivative of a function of this sort, right, then you get this. Okay, so I hope this video helped, and I hope to see you next time in the other video, in which we're going to be talking about the quotient rule.